All right, so this video is going to be more of my social rant type of video. It's going to be about jobs again. I talk about that more than anything when I make these type of job or make these type of videos. It's from a different angle. Like we already know the job market's kind of screwed. People aren't able to find jobs like that. Again, I've said multiple times, we're at a point where if you separate from a job willingly or unwillingly, you are probably going to be SOL in terms of finding another comparable job in terms of pay, benefits, especially if you're married, have a family, all that stuff. You're probably going to be SOL for at least a year, if not longer at this point. And so that was bad enough. Another issue that we've been noticing, but seems to not have been emphasized quite as much, or maybe it's just falling into the background because all of these different things have been discussed profusely is the lack of entry level jobs. And I'm not just talking about the job descriptions, like to get entry into an entry level job, not even just in cybersecurity, because even cyber and IT in general, depending on what branch you're looking to go into, has that rhetoric of these guys are trying to demand 5 years of experience out of me for an entry level, operations manager or junior project manager or cybersecurity analyst, whatever have you. Like we've heard those type of complaints a lot. Maybe this will be a continuation of that very issue, but entry level jobs are gone. That's the whole gist of this whole thing. Entry level jobs are gone, but not just because of the job descriptions and the requirements that these companies claim that they are putting out that people need to have to supposedly gain entry into these jobs. Part of the reason they are even making those requirements or supposedly advertising those requirements for an entry level job is they're simply trying to make things more competitive. That's where you get into situations where, like, I've seen a post of a dude saying, like, on LinkedIn, someone was demanding, I think it was a hiring manager or some like mid-level manager or something, was claiming that applicants for a certain job needed to have, I think, anywhere from 5 to 10 years of experience with a certain technology. Only for the creator of said technology to say, I created this thing less than 3 years ago. There's no way anyone's going to be that advanced and familiar with my technology. And you're saying you needed 10 years of experience to stick out. You know what I'm saying? So now we're at a point where companies and the people that represent them are saying things that are nonsensical. I think, at least I think, just for the sake of trying to be as competitive as possible, because while not all people clearly have degrees, and I think the higher level the degree, the smaller the demographic, the fact is a lot of people, damn near everyone, has at least a bachelor's these days, relatively speaking, especially historically speaking. And then you go to masters. While that definitely is a smaller community, it's not as small as exclusive as it used to be, especially due to the introduction of online colleges like the one I did, where you can get a master's in less than a year. Whether you do a thesis or a final project or whatever, you can get a master's in a fraction of the time and cost compared to what we used to. So the very value of degrees are going down, but everyone has them, whether you're in STEM, as some people say, basket weaving, business, whatever it is, like everyone has degrees, like they're far more common. So I think the job market, those companies are just trying to find any little way to get people to be more competitive, but in ways that don't necessarily always make sense or just don't add up. When they block out, like, say, new college grads, and let me settle in on this for a second. College grads, the way I see things, college grads have an opportunity, like say if they've done internships 2 3 years out of their undergrad career, their entirety of their undergrad career, if they bounced just from undergrad straight into grad school and they did internships there, and let's say all or at the very least majority of their internships were with one company consistently, right? They may have went to different locations, but they mess with the same company over and over and over, so now they have a solid relationship. And when they graduate, them getting a full-time offer from that company would only make sense. But if that's not your situation, if you or your grades were never good enough to get into internships or networking wasn't as good, if you for whatever reason left your undergrad or graduate program without a job in tow, again, you're kind of SOL. So it seems like you have to bank everything on your ability to land a job fresh out of school. If you're not able to do that and you don't plan on doing something government related, which still takes a while, then it seems like you're going to have a very hard time. When it comes to that, one thing that I've been hearing and also saw this online, which is what prompted me to say this, you have people closer to my age, anywhere from, let's say, their mid to late 20s, saying when they get on certain project teams or when they interact with different teams, they are usually the youngest person in the area, or at the very least amongst the youngest. But they don't see new fresh college grads, new young faces that are 21, 22, 23 with a bachelor's of whatever or a master's or whatever or an MBA, trying to fill these spots while you have a 27-year-old employee who is pretty much settled into their career or into their company. They would remember, like, I used to be an intern at my early 20s in these type of positions, or in my early mid 20s, fresh out of grad school or undergrad and transitioning into earlier roles. Now, a lot of people who are sub 30, but are still older, 25, 26, 27 at least, are noticing that the younger people in that experience of being brought in young and establishing those relationships with the company and all that stuff is not happening as much. So now it seems like your career is not truly going to get started unless, once again, you already established a relationship with a company from your time in school, took advantage of it, and that led to a full time position fresh out the gate, which more times than not requires you to relocate to a major metropolitan area that you're not already in or live close to. So whatever money you make is going to be eaten up right away, or you miss out on that for whatever reason, but now you have to spend however many years, because usually the idea is even after you wrap up school, get a degree, even if it's a useful one, even if it's a STEM degree, right? You're probably still going to spend at least a couple years looking for your first big boy job or big girl job. Even before the screwed up job market as we come to know it now, that was kind of the rhetoric. Like, you're not supposed to land something fresh out the gate. Depending on who you talk to, some people, like parents, and their expectations can be a bit different, but that was usually the thing. Like, you get out undergrad, now you think you can land a job. No, boy, you're going to be spending at least the first year, 2 years removed, maybe 3 years removed, working in a freaking coffee shop or something. And then for whatever reason, it finally just hits. No one knows why. That might be something I look into the older I get, because that doesn't make sense to me. Why is it that after you get a degree, primarily one that's useful, if you're able to network or whatever, and it still takes you 2, 3 years after the fact for your career to truly get started? That's just weird. But let me not stray too far away from that. My whole issue being, again, entry level jobs are gone. Not only because of the things that are being promoted and the skills that people say you supposedly need to have, whether they're nonsensical or they're accurate and they're realistic, it seems like that space isn't even being carved out. People feeling like there's a lack of entry level jobs, or younger people aren't coming in as much simply due to competition. Like one person saying they can't land a job, but if a company is hiring multiple times throughout the year in waves, consulting firms, tech firms, and whatnot, and they're still filling those roles with young people, then yeah, as an individual, it's gonna suck. But those companies are doing what they're supposed to do, and those spaces are still, open for young folks to take advantage of and to start their career. And whether they stay with the company forever, whether they hopscotch and job hop all around, either way, they get that process going. But now it seems like those positions for younger entry level, less developed talent, it seems like the very opportunity to fill up those seats aren't there. Either those seats seem to be gone, or there aren't nearly as many. But again, it seems to be a common rhetoric that older people are saying, even if they're not even 30 yet, but that's still pretty young, and they've been in their line of work for a good amount of time. They'll still be like, yeah, I'm not seeing as many young folks coming in internship or even full-time capacity doing the same type of stuff I was doing. I'm still the youngest person in the room, and I'm like 28, 29, about to be 30 if you're not 30 already. And that's where it gets worrisome, because my question at that point becomes, what do we have to tell the young folks coming up, the younger folks? Because I ain't senior citizen yet, but what do we have to tell these folks coming in? Because it used to be, again, you establish a relationship with these companies, take advantage of your internship, all that stuff. You can land a job fresh out of college. If that happens to not be your situation, and if you're not going into the military, main piece of advice was leverage your network. See if you can get someone to refer you into a position in their employer space. They said that there's a tech analyst or tech consultant role open, or a tech specialist, an e-discovery specialist, project management, what have you. These positions are open. You've done your research, you've looked online, you've seen it. Reach out to your line brother, reach out to your line sister, reach out to any soror or frat, reach out to even a former teacher if they know something about it. Reach out to a old classmate that maybe you weren't super close with, but you were cool with. Like, y'all familiar. You ain't going. They're not going to not know who you are unless their memory's just that bad. They'll know who you are, and they'll be like, "Hey, man, if you happen to work in HR, especially like some type of recruiter, because a lot of girls in particular go into recruiting and talent sourcing. So if you got that you can reach out to, whatever, leverage that. See if you can leverage that relationship to help get you in. That was the whole thing. If you couldn't lean purely on your own talent because the competition was just so numerous as well as fierce, like it wasn't just quantity, but also the quality of those other candidates are just not to be messed with, even if you are up to par as well. And that used to be the main piece of advice. And now that's not working. I can talk from personal experience. I've tried multiple referrals, multiple different companies. I've had an individual friend refer me to Lord knows however many jobs over the years, doesn't go anywhere. This one girl that I went to high school with that I wasn't even cool with hit me up out the blue and basically just, I'm assuming she would have gotten like some type of bonus out of it. She was still willing to put her name on the line attached to mine and referred me into the consulting firm she worked for at the time. That didn't lead anywhere. Whenever I checked the portal, that status of the application never changed. And it got to the point where I forgot about it. I think maybe a year plus after the fact, I checked on it, and that's when it finally said like not considered or inactive or something like that. But prior to that, it was always like processing, processing, processing until it finally just stopped. And I never got any update on it at all. So, what nuggets of advice or direction can we give the young folks who think they're doing the right thing to be prepped for the big boy, big girl world or the real world, but nothing's working? We can't tell them, well, you can, but it seems ineffective to tell them to leverage their network because even referrals don't seem to be getting anywhere. Taking just any old little dusty job is not as helpful. It could work in that you was to start with something like remedial that doesn't have anything to do with their education. But once you get your foot into the door of that company and you do that job anywhere from 6 months to a year, you have a conversation with someone and say, "Hey, I want to come in and switch over to this team. This person's leaving, this person's retiring, or there's just an opening, or here's just my intentions. How can I, get to this position or as close to it as I can and start putting my education to use?" You can make that type of connection. But chances are that initial job, even if that plan works for you, that initial job is most likely going to be so lackluster in pay that if you have to live by yourself, if you can't stay home for whatever reason, it may not even be worth taking the job because yeah, you're gonna be making some type of check. You'll be busy, I guess, but you're not necessarily going to be productive. The job's not going to be effective if it doesn't pay enough for you to still not be able to cover rent and keep a roof over your head. Because at that point, you're just working for the sake of giving your money away to no real end, right? So that's also where I stress, if you have the ability to stay home and it's a healthy environment and you can work, even if it's a remedial job, 15 an hour, 20 an hour, you feel like you deserve more, just staying at home will save a whole lot of headache with that. If you still want to live life a little bit, you can still do that. If it suits you, if that suits your circumstances. If it doesn't, then a lot of people kind of just fake it till they make it, essentially, until things get better. But if you don't have to do that, I would, advise you to not do that because it's really rough out here. Younger folks aren't getting into jobs. It seems like there are less chairs for young folks, especially fresh like grad talent to pick up. Even if you go into something on demand like engineering, as we learned through the tech wave, was supposed to be safe, high paying, and all that stuff. That's not safe. Engineers are still getting whatever degrees in education and internships, whatever, and they still also have to deal with 500 plus applications over the course of a year or however long before they land something. Networking is supposed to used to be framed as the golden ticket that could get you anywhere or definitely at least kickstart the process. You were supposed to be able to, at bare minimum, land an interview. Can't even guarantee that someone will respond to you via email, let alone phone calls. A lot of these corporate offices, you can't just walk in and try to figure something out because the buildings are locked if you don't belong there off rip. So that makes that whole old school thing weird. Walking up and trying to talk to someone in person, they just redirect you to online because that's part of their process. I've heard ways and people have landed jobs by faking that they've already done the interviews and stuff. And they said today was supposed to be their first day or whatever day was supposed to be their first day. And that apparently worked. But I don't hear that often. If you can finesse it, finesse it. But to me, that doesn't seem like a common thing. I would imagine some situations that could work, some places that could work, because some places literally are just struggling to shuffle through all their applications. So if you want to get fancy with it and finesse it and bypass that process to stick out, then it's like cool if it works. But at the very least, the general typical process, it's not working anymore. And so that's where again, I'm like, I don't know what to tell y'all. Like, what can we tell college grads, soon to be college grads, even if we go further back to the next generation that has a little more breathing room, even if you had to go back to maybe like freshmen or sophomores in college or freshmen and sophomores in high school, right? And you wanted to give them some direction, what to expect in the real world and all that stuff. What can you tell them? Like what advice can you tell them? You go to school, get a degree, get a job. And that a lot of people hate that template, but that used to be like a foolproof thing. I was just at GameStop buying the two Darksiders games as well as a Tomb Raider game, and I was speaking to the cashier guy, and we kind of talked about it just a little bit, and he made the point that a lot of people make. Like, hey man, like I know the circumstances that I live in are at least partially my fault, and I have to own that as a man. Being he's 25 and he was like being 25, and there are people out here making millions, or even if they're making like six figs, super young and not even 30 yet, and it seems like they can travel, they can do whatever they want and live life. And here I am trying to figure all this stuff out. And again, he acknowledged like the conditions I'm living in and where I am in life are partially my fault at minimum, and I have to accept that. At the same time, when you look at the overall climate that our parents and grandparents were born into, like they had everything. Not to say it was always easy, but they had everything. Like the whole go to school, get a degree, get a job, and you can coast through life from there with a family. You could survive off one income. Your lady didn't have to work if she didn't want to, and that whole thing. Not having to be as stern with money. Even my mom, who, my mom's side of the family, well, both sides of my family, you can say came from humble beginnings per se. And even my mom said my grandfather, who I guess you can say partially raised my mom because she was raised partially by my great grandmother as well as my great grandfather. She was like, my grandfather, her grandfather, my great grandfather that took care of her and my aunties and my uncle when they were around, and they would go out and eat, and he would shop for them, buy clothes for them. They still had like Jordans and all the nice stuff to a degree. She was like, that man was able to do that off of one income with no college education, working in a factory in Cleveland. And now you can have a master's making six figs, trying to live by yourself. And it's like, are you sure about that? Do you really want to do that? Part of that is money management for sure. Your spending is well under your control. And I actually plan on making a video of a book that really helped me with that. It still speaks to the circumstances that we are living in. Definitely, you have a level of control over, where you are in life and the choices you make that takes you where you ultimately end up going and where you end up landing in life. So there's definitely control we have. To me, that does not negate the circumstances we are living in. And right now, the circumstances are very weird. My point being, have we overall looked at the landscape, evaluated it, and when you think of like not just especially for boys, you grow up, you gotta be a man, you gotta provide, you gotta stay on your own 10 and all this and that. Have we actually looked at when it comes to the young boys and girls coming up or the young adults who are already in college and they got to look forward to this stuff? Have we actually considered what avenues are available and what avenues can we carve open for them? Instead of leaning on the old pieces of advice or direction that we've heard multiple times in real life through media and whatever else, like what would actually work? Like, can we say without a doubt that leveraging your network would consistently work in today's market? Can we say upskilling yourself, just teaching yourself basic skills, whatever, even on your own and doing your own projects. Would that really work? Would even embellishing on your resume and documentation, would that really work? Would trying to finesse it by physically going to the office spaces and all that stuff, would that actually work? And I'm not talking about, one person that did any of those things and some other stuff and it worked out, and now all of a sudden everybody's got to follow suit. No, I'm talking like, what is something that we could encourage the younger generation in general, not just black folks, in general? What are tips and directions that we can provide to them that will give them at least some degree of vision of how to navigate the world when they get out there, primarily when they don't live at home no more? Because right now, I think we're very short on anything like that. Nothing seems too stable. What are their options? Corporate America as overall concept doesn't look too good. The government, anything tied to it, doesn't look too friendly. So, what could we actually, establish as just general direction if we had to give someone advice and to be like, hey, what's out there right now and what can we do about it? Because right now, if someone was to ask me that question, I would be like, I don't know what to tell you because I emptied all my clips. I used all my options. My mom's tried to refer me in and whatever, and for whatever that don't work. Or get me connected with the HR person in the government contractor she works for. That don't work. It's funny because again, when I go back to the conversation that I had with the guy at GameStop, and one of the things that he brought up was basically recognizing that we're all in this together. Like as Americans, as Westerners, we're all in this together. And I told him like the same thing. Like I just expanded on that and was like, yeah, man, like I feel like I'm about to be 30 in less than a year. And I've done some things in my life, it's basic accomplishments, a couple degrees. My job is good. I like it. It pays well. Me being at home definitely helps. But I feel like I should already, especially when he brought up like people being in their early mid 20s, making millions, living life, probably making millions just off of yelling at a computer screen. I feel like I should have my life together already when that type of stuff is possible. And I agreed and was basically telling them like how again I felt the same in terms of feeling like I should already have things together. I don't know why things are so difficult. I don't know why when I use all the different tips and tricks and find new ways to make myself more attractive in the market and whatever. At least before I was in a job that I liked and was stable. Um, I didn't understand why I was having this much of a hard time. And I mentioned how one thing that I started remembering was we're all dealing with this. Like it's not just me. Everyone's dealing with this. Of course, you got people that still working, whatever. People got jobs, primarily the jobs that actually will grow into something like actual career jobs. But we're all dealing with this. Like most Americans don't even have an extra $1,000 in their account at any given time for an emergency fund, whether it's by themselves or with a partner. Most of us are 1, 2 paychecks away from being SOL when it comes to our financial situation. Even again, if you're single or have a partner have been saving for a while, because prices are rising so much that even if you have stacked up, let's call it 2 grand over the course of maybe a few months or something like that. This has happened to me multiple times, and you stacked up 2 grand, maybe a bit more. You need to dip into them savings because some idiot screwed up your car in a car accident. Now you got to pay to get it fixed, or maybe there was an issue with payroll at work, or you didn't get paid as much, or you got dropped out the contract out the blue. Then you have to dip into that to pay off rent, and now you're SOL because it was 2 grand that you saved, but that's only enough for a month and a quarter these days. So you really don't have long before you have to find something. Then you got people that will dip into the whole hustle mentality where you got to take what you can get. And it's like, I would much rather, I hear a rhetoric very often of how people are like, man, I much rather work 3, 4, 5 jobs to prevent myself from being homeless or from, prevent myself from being in an unhealthy situation if I can't live at home because it's unhealthy, where the case is. And I was thinking about that as I was driving away from the GameStop, and I'm like, that's BS. That is so BS, especially again with black folks, because we just love to pride ourselves on triumphing over challenges and difficulty for what seems to be a very little payoff. Because let's say, even if you did, and I did this when I was in Dallas, I had to do this. Even if you managed to have 2, 3 jobs, full time, part time, some mix of them, on site, remote, whatever, and you manage to get paid from those 2 3 jobs. You still have to make sure like you work out, you take care of your health, all this other stuff. And let's say you still don't make enough because you just took what you can get. So maybe you got something at a gas station, maybe at a grocery store, maybe in a clinic that you didn't have to get like become a nurse for or something. And every job only pays 15 an hour, maybe less, right? Minimum wage is even worse. And it's like you got 2 3 jobs, but the pay from each one is low. Well, you got to do something, so you just better work just for the heck of it. But if 2 3 jobs are still not enough to get you where you need to go to at least preserve that roof over your head, then what's the point of doing that lackluster work or that remedial work just for the sake of saying you're working? What if you can't, like, if you try to have a conversation with someone and you're like, hey, man, I've been doing this stocking job or whatever for however many weeks or months, and honestly, it's not working for me financially. There's got to be a way I can move up. There's got to be a way I can move to the corporate side. There's got to be a way I can be one of the managers. Y'all short on the manager. I've done this type of work before. You know what I mean? At least move me up there. Even then, that might not guarantee anything. Whether you tell folks to go into nursing or they want to go into nursing, that's supposed to be a money making thing. The tech world, that's not guaranteed. That's super competitive now that everyone knows about it. Then you have the different specialties within the tech world. You always got stuff you can do like content creation, music, anything art based. You got so many options, but what's the likelihood of you being picked up in any of these spaces? Primarily the 9 to 5 spaces, the things that people try to avoid. What's the likelihood of you actually being picked up, and how can you navigate this space? And for the first time, probably in recent history, we have literally zero idea. Like older folks, at least within my when it comes to my peers, the most we'll tell you is like, hey man, if I like you, I'll try to refer someone to the company, whatever, but I don't think I could do more than that. Cause we're all just kind of stumped. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, we're all kind of just taking this ride together. That's my whole thing, man. Like entry level jobs are gone. Seems like the spaces for young professionals is not being carved out like it used to be. It seems like you're gonna have to be at minimum in your mid 20s, even with a college education, to be able to take advantage of any type of job opportunity out there that could actually mean anything to you financially. The golden ticket or golden tips that we used to lean on are not as feasible or not as useful as they used to be. You have all these things that used to be in place and are falling through, and we're seeing like, yeah, a lot of these old pieces of advice, they ain't there no more. So what left is there? That's my whole thing. But enough rant. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video off here. Let me know your comments, feedbacks, thoughts, suggestions, anything like that in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.